I really want to move on because I just can't wait to say this name. Our next award tonight is for the Adventurer of the Year. Louis, listen up, you little cherub. Listen up to this next one. I would now like to welcome to the stage Mr. Denis Martinet. Denis Martinet, il est le Managing Director of Bremont Tegia. Bienvenue, Denis! I just love saying it.
Yeah, what a setup, ladies and gentlemen. Here I was, just fly down to Sydney, give a talk, give a few watches, and here I am in front of those really inspiring people. Quite a humbling experience when I'm here providing probably the commercial break. So, let's start. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here tonight, and thank you to the Australian Geographic Society for letting us being involved. And Chrissy, whilst I may not renew my subscription, actually I don't have one, I'm pretty sure that Bremont will want to renew its involvement. Because Bremont Watch Company, even though we're quite a young company, we've been involved with quite a number of adventurers and explorers, and indeed, on occasions, with some daredevil actors. Recently, Ben Saunders, who walked to the South Pole and back unassisted. We went with Bear Grylls fighting in the wilderness, and more recently, we had a very, very long way down with a chap called Charlie Borman. But why we've been involved with those people is because Bremont has always encouraged men and women to go beyond, pursue, and very much conquer their dreams. And Bremont is there during their journey, physically. It provides a robust companion, a timepiece, which on occasion can even not tell you the time, but be used as navigation, as Ben did on his journey to the South Pole. And it can even resist repeated attempts at destruction, especially on the wrists of one same Charlie Borman. For Bremont, like these men and women, is very much tested beyond endurance. And endurance, ladies and gentlemen, was surely needed for tonight's Adventure of the Year. A man who has achieved the first in Australian adventure. On June the 28th this year, Jason Beechcroft paddled back into Sydney Harbour, completing an 18,000-kilometre journey that started in Rose Bay 17 months earlier. Jason became the first person to circumnavigate the Australian continent, including Tasmania. Now, I'm not an adventurer, but I'm a bit of a sailor, and for me the Hobart race is something fantastic. And he did it on a kayak, not once, but twice across this infamous Bass Straits. Pretty amazing. His journey was mostly unsupported, except for some food drops. And during those food drops, he had to fend off some wildlife. You're used to it, I'm not. I find that pretty scary, actually. I come from mountains where the scariest thing you can see is a blue cow. He battled sharks, some crocs, some more sharks. His kayak was nibbled on by some more sharks. But the story that really gets me is that when he was asked, isn't it a bit dangerous to fend off crocodiles they're competing for food? And he says, deadpan, nah, I won't do the accent, sorry. He said, nah, I felt I could handle that one. He was small. Well, I couldn't handle even a small crocodile, I assure you that. So he's a true adventurer, not only a kayaker, he's also a mountaineer, rock climber, a whitewater paddler, and finally a bushwalker. So his endurance, courage, and tenacity are the hallmarks of the Australian Geographic Adventure of the Year. Let's have a look at his journey.
Reality support from different people. People have been people, crazy too, and then now I'm up here, here I am, and I said, man, continue to get on.
Ladies and gentlemen, Jason Beachcroft, Adventure of the Year 2014. And what a beard. It's ticking, but it's not a bomb.
Thank you. I've got to admit that I wasn't really thinking that this would be happening. I wanted to go on a journey for myself, and whilst I was inspired by a whole stack of people that had sort of gone before me, it was kind of nice to have completed my journey and succeeded at what I was planning. Yeah, I'd like to thank Australian Geographic and Chrissy and Dennis, and but there's 50 million other people that I kind of need to thank as well, and that's the nature of my journey. It made me feel a lot better about humans in general than you'll see in the media, and the level of support from people just asking whether I was okay, not because I was looking too bad, I hope, but you know, asking, you know, am I right with water? Is there any help that they could offer me? Right through my journey was fantastic. People who had never met me before was going, oh, well, yeah, you could camp over there, but you could come back to our house instead. So, you know, that was a good thing too, and that happened on a few occasions. I needed to thank my family, I guess, and Sandy and the ALI crew, Ken and Darren and TI would be the main ones, but there was a lot of support within the Sikh hiking community as well on my journey, and I need to thank those people as well, but it'll take too long to mention. I've been told that I've got to say this is going straight to the pool room. But I'll need to get a pool room first. So.
Well done. Congratulations to Jason. Denis, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. Our next award is indeed one of our most prestigious, and that is our Lifetime of Conservation Award. A lovely gentleman is here to sponsor the award and help us present it tonight. Would you please welcome Mr. Greg Maggi? Hello. Please welcome him to the stage. He is the Executive Director of Parks and Resorts Delaware North. Come on up. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Over to you.
Very much. Well, I'm not as exotic in name as Denis. Welcome, everyone. I must say I'm humbled by the presence in the room tonight. My beautiful table here we've got some staff here and some wonderful supporters. And you probably think, well, what do resorts have to do with conservation and adventure? I see myself as a little bit of adventure. I like to fly fish. Yes, I walk about 4 or 5 kilometres and look at streams and what have you, but I see myself also as a conservationist with pure catch and release. So I look around and I feel humbled tonight. I see some amazing people. We watch people in our televisions. We read the Australian Geographic. We see some doyens of adventure, and I think I watched Dick in a Bell Ranger going around the world when I was, well, I won't give my age away, but it was a few years back. You haven't changed a bit, Dick. I want to hand it to Chrissy and her team for bringing Delaware North into the fray here. I think it's quite a adventurous and quite a pioneering partnership and a journey that I think will last for a long time. Delaware North, it's a privately run company out of all places. Anyone that's been to Buffalo and New York, probably on their way to Niagara, it's an amazing spot. The family there is very committed to not only Australia, but we run some iconic destinations and iconic national parks through Australia and the US. We've got Heather and Glenn, who I'm sure may have base jumped off our iconic park in Yosemite. We run Yellowstone Park. We have a number of resorts through some other iconic destinations in New York States. Here in Australia, we're very, very fortunate, and we are just tenants. We don't own, we don't profess to own. We're very, very, very privileged to be in some iconic areas. I think Chrissy alluded to before in El Questro, for anyone who's been to El Questro, just a mere 1 million acres there. The Kimberley is a special place, but we also move east into the Red Centre, where we share probably one of the most heartfelt experiences that I've personally experienced in all of Australia. And then, of course, our relationship with the Great Barrier Reef in Lizard Island and Heron Island. Heron Island, of course, whom is sponsoring this award tonight. We see ourselves as being privileged in those areas. Both at Lizard and Heron, we have a fantastic relationship with 2 iconic research stations, both run by the Australian Museum here in Sydney, and one of the University of Queensland in Lizard. Tremendous research, tremendous dedication by what you could call conservationists, but pioneers. The research that goes into the great dilemma that we are probably causing, that in the Crown of Thorns. I'm humbled tonight with Valerie Taylor. Valerie and I caught up earlier. She was there in 1971. We welcomed so many beautiful people to our islands to experience, and Valerie was there in, I think, 1971, Valerie, feeding what we call... No, I wasn't there. Certainly wasn't born then. The famous cod hole, which Valerie quickly stepped on my toes and said, "But they're not cod, they're gropers." Amazing. Tonight, we have the pleasure of, I have the pleasure of giving the Lifetime of Conservation, which has been previously awarded to the likes of Valerie, who sits with us tonight. Ian Kiernan, Kim McKay, who can't be with us this evening. She was going to join us, but I think she might be one of those ones, Chrissy in Canberra. So we'll give her a black mark. And obviously Bob Brown. Tonight's award, and unfortunately this gentleman can't be with us this evening, goes to a fellow that has been very, very outspoken and is one of the true advocates in action on climate change. His advocacy on pollution, on population and carbon emissions culminated in him being named Australian of the Year in 2007, at a time when environmental issues were becoming prevalent in the Australian public debate. A prolific writer, ranged from zoology to paleontology. He's been on television recently. He's written and presented several documentaries, including Islands of the Sky and Wild Australasia, and is the Chief Counsellor of the Climate Council, an independent organisation that advises public bodies in climate science. I think everyone in the room knows whom we're talking about, and I think we're going to run a short film on Professor Tim Flannery.
If we keep on doing natural gas category, it is going to be rigid. By 2100, temperatures are likely to be 4 degrees on current rates of emissions growth, 4 degrees higher than they were in pre-industrial times. It wasn't that long ago that the Climate Commission was abolished and Australians were left without an independent, credible source of information on climate change.
It's only because thousands of passionate people stood up and chipped into the biggest crowdfunding campaign in Australian history that we've been able to continue providing independent, engaging, authoritative information to the Australian public.
Right now, we're witnessing an unprecedented rise in climate denialism in the Australian media and in politics.
I just look at the evidence. There is no evidence.
Personally, I've never seen anything like it. But I know that the most powerful thing I can do is to respond with the facts. The Climate Council is the best placed group to call out these fringe views on all sides of the debate, firmly and publicly.
As I said earlier, unfortunately Tim can't join us this evening, so in recognition of his continuous and skilled contribution to the communication on this important subject, on his behalf, I'd like to welcome to the stage Mr. Rob Purvis.
Thank you very much. I'm very sorry to tell you all tonight that I spoke to Tim this afternoon and he has a serious illness in his family and he just couldn't get up from Melbourne, but he wishes he could be here. This is a great honour to Tim. I've worked with Tim for many, many years over many, many projects, and he is a great Australian. He's a great conservationist. He asked me to pass on 3 things to you. Firstly, the Australian Geographic Society, I think he used a swear word when he said it in a nice way, is something that's so bloody special. So to Tim, to you, Dick, he passes on. It's a wonderful initiative that you started with Pip. Secondly, also, he's contributed to the magazine a lot over many, many years, and he has a great respect for the magazine. And finally, to everyone, Tim just wishes you a great evening. And as I said, he's very sorry he couldn't be here, and continue his work, hoping and praying, I suppose, to get science, the real facts and climate change out there in the community. So on behalf of Tim, I'm delighted to accept this award. Thank you.
Better do one just
Okay. So good. This is 2 on our table.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Beautifully accepted, of course. Our prayers are with Professor Flannery and his family. And thank you so much, Greg, for your support of these awards. Just a reminder that this is the last chance for the raffle tickets, the opportunity to win a trip to the magnificent Heron Island. This is the last chance for that. Now, as I welcome Greg Mortimer to the stage, I hope I don't make him blush. It may be possible, I'm not sure. I heard a rumour that if you look up in the dictionary, legend in one's own lifetime, you will see the photo of Greg Mortimer. Apparently this is true. Is this true, isn't it? It's fact. It's fact, actually. Yeah, not a rumour, it's a fact. Of course, as many of you know, along with his friend, Mr. McCartney Snape, he was the first Aussie to summit Everest. And as all the climbing nerds in the room will tell you, without the aid of oxygen. Everybody loves that. But I will just say this one other story that I did hear about you. It was such a nice story. And it was 5 minutes of your life, but it affected many lives. Of course, we all saw in the media just recently, there was that terrible incident in the Himalayas, and there were those two Aussies that were unaccounted for. I think it was the father, Simon, and his daughter, Sophie. Remember that? It was all over the news. No one had been able to hear from Simon and Sophie. And the family and their friends were absolutely distraught. They didn't know what to do. And someone came up with this bright idea. I know, why don't you get Greg Mortimer, who knows the area, who knows everything that this family would be going through, who knows the operation, what that would be going through at the moment, get him to speak to the grandfather. And Greg, I don't know how long that conversation was. I'm sure for you it was such a small amount of time in your life, but it brought so much, what would you say, so much pleasure, so much ease to so many different people. So thank you so much for taking that time. And of course, the end of the story is 2 days later, Simon and Sophie did call home and go, what's all the fuss about? They'd just been without a phone. So would you please welcome for a very special award tonight, the man that is obviously not only a legend in his own lifetime who can spring onto the stage, hello, how cool is that, but also a genuinely beautiful man. Please welcome Greg Mortimer.
Ouch, from a beautiful woman. That's great. This is a great honour for me because I'm about to present an award to someone who is a hero and someone who has had an impact on my life since I was a teenager. And I first met him in 1973 on Lord Howe Island. And he had some sort of electronics company that he was just starting. and so it's a great honour for me to present this very special award from Australian Geographic Society to none other than the father of this event and the patron and founder, of course, and very good friend, Dick Smith. And as we know, he is the recipient of many very deserved awards, but this one in particular is for 50 years of his life, which has been engaged in adventures. And they've included some extraordinary things, of which we know many, but record-breaking things such as the 82-83 solo flight around the world in his helicopter, his helicopter flight solo to the North Pole in 87, his pole-to-pole circumnavigation of the globe in the Twin Otter in 98-99, and then, of course, the non-stop balloon, first balloon crossing of Australia in 1993. And now that I look back on it, meeting Dick in 1973, there was something about a balance in him. He had this he was immersed in adventures. He helped me go to Ball's Pyramid, swum onto the end of Ball's Pyramid taking loads. But he had this balance because he understood the workings of the cash register as well and did rather well at it, you'd have to say. So obviously enough, Dick's adventures have not only been in the outdoors but very much in the world of commerce, and I'd call them fairly brave adventures. Dick Smith Electronics, Australian Geographic, Dick Smith Foods, and then recently, of course, perhaps a little less known, but it will become very much more known in the coming years and decades, and that's Dick's very spirited forays into the world of ideas, including his high-profile questioning of the prevailing beliefs, the sacred cow, about population growth, and from what he would say, perhaps a die-hard capitalist, the concept of perpetual growth economics. And he's done those with the same bravery that he takes to the bush and the outdoors and adventures. So from a kid growing up in Roseville, Dick obviously took off then at an early age. If he had a job aspiration in those days, apparently it was to be a park ranger. Couldn't have done anything better than being out in the bush all day. He still says he was very lucky to grow up in the 50s because of the lack of rules and the lack of parental fear. And he would come home from school, disappear into the bush by himself, or meet other kids, jump off cliffs. He built a raft to paddle across Middle Harbour. In the days when people were being eaten by sharks in Middle Harbour, when he was at the grand old age of 8 in 1952, he joined the local Cub Scouts and got a little more structured in his adventuring, so that camping and bushworking and climbing, canyoning and so on, just getting added and added to his repertoire. And then leaving school at 15, he had something which changed his life completely. And that was that he met a Rover Scout from the 1st East Roval Troop. And in May that year, he saw an article in a magazine describing how 2 Sydney rock climbers had tried to climb, and unsuccessfully, Ball's Pyramid. And those of you who don't know it, it's the world's highest sea spire. It's off Lord Howe Island. It's an extraordinary feature, unique to the world. And Dick knew one of these climbers, a 21-year-old Rick Higgins, who was a Rover Scout as well in the Roseville Troop. And the other was a guy called David Roots, who was also a student, member of the Sydney Bushwalkers. So Dick was so enamoured with this idea of climbing Ball's Pyramid that he persuaded the 1st East Roseville Rover leader, Tony Balthazar, to part with 2,000 quid. That's where his commercial balance came in, and to charter a boat to take a group of scouts out to the pyramid. So, 25th of November 1964, the Taihoa set sail out of Sydney, carrying Rick, Dave, Dick and half a dozen other scouts, and headed up to the northeast. They didn't get to the summit. They struck a lot of things along the way, ran out of food, ran out of time, and the following year, I think it was, 17 guys from the Sydney Rock Climbing Club did manage to get to the top of the pyramid. In 1980, Dick went back there with John Worrell and Hugh Ward, and they climbed it successfully. And not just that, he made a point of it, because on the summit he unfurled the New South Wales flag because he had discovered that no one owned it, and he claimed it for the state of New South Wales. So maybe that 64 pyramid expedition was a significant and high point for Dick, but it certainly flicked a switch in his brain and set a course for him that we've been the beneficiary of throughout his life so far. He may deny it, but I think he has some adrenaline addiction. He has certainly fine-tuned the notion of risk management, and he knows how to very carefully analyse risk, qualify it, go out, devise plans to do it and do it. And he's done it repeatedly and he's still alive. Pitt might say somewhat miraculously. Anyway, it's changed not only Dick's life, those adventures, but I think perhaps one of the more extraordinary things about Dick is that it's changed. He manages to drag people with him. And the impact of that is what's in this room, for example, in how much it's changed our lives as well. He reportedly once said that if he hadn't been to the pyramid in 1964, he wouldn't have started Dick Smith Electronics, for example. And all of his successes in outdoors and business are put down to very good planning, good risk management, and doing it over and over and over again. He will certainly say that he has a good measure of that other fantastic ingredient, which is good luck. If you can imagine flying around the world in a little helicopter where if one of those moving parts fails, you're dead, basically. And so that combination of being able to understand mechanisms and machinery and take adventures have meant that Dick has fashioned a series of adventures which no one else in the world has done. He's fashioned adventures in his own mind and of his own making, and in that they are unique. So 50 years have passed since that adventure, the pyramid adventure. There's an awful lot of things. Several lifetimes have gone on since then. He's continued to encourage those around him, at extraordinarily wide range of people throughout our society, to go out there and take adventures on their own and to do it responsibly. He's very proud of Australian Geographic, I believe, its financial and philosophical success and its continued success at that. What's somewhat known in our society, but I can assure you nowhere near as deeply as what is happening, is Dick's generosity, the extraordinary amount of funds that he's given throughout our society and continues to do so. Not only that, giving a boot into the backside of other people to do so as well, quite publicly and very successfully. In his 70s, now 70, bundle of energy, same as ever, still infectious and still going on adventures. I didn't know how to do this. I was wondering how many Richard Smiths there are in the world. It'd be interesting to know how many Richard Smiths there are in the world. There's certainly only one Richard Harold Smith. And I do not know of anyone else in the world at all who's created the combination of commercial success, of adventuring success in his own making. There is no other Richard Harold Smith. And we're certainly all very much, the country and beyond, lucky to have him. And let's have a look at some of those adventures.
1981, and America's news media gathered to record the start of the historic attack.
You couldn't blame Dick Smith for double-checking this morning to see if all the nuts were still fastened on his helicopter. Most chopper flights are relatively short, but this helicopter is supposed to fly 34,000 miles around the world. That's never been done before.
At 12:52 Eastern Standard Time, Dick Smith and John Wellington aboard Australian Geographic flyer lifted off from Gala.
I hope that I'll be remembered as someone with a bit of enthusiasm who had a bit of get up and go and did lots of different things and really enjoyed doing. Not so much as someone who made money or anything like that.
The aviator is trying to become the first to cross from New Zealand to Australia against the prevailing wind. The two-ton balloon began the record attempt from New Zealand's northern tip early this morning.
A lot of people still have the idea that Dick Smith is a businessman and he's sort of like a typical stereotype businessman. I suppose it's really a fight inside me that I've got hold of sort of a tiger by the tail of the business, and so many businessmen end up at the age of 50 or 60 and they say, look, I'm not fit to do anything now, and I'm not going to let that happen. And I'm going to try and turn my life back into what it was when I enjoyed myself tremendously at the age of sort of 20, 25, in doing those outdoors things which I love.
Please welcome Dick to the stage to accept this special award.
Great. Thank you. We're going to take a photo. Yeah. Hold it your hand. Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Good. Yes, we do. Here's, I've got to say something. I feel a bit guilty because when I give talks to schools, I say the most important thing for success is to surround yourself with capable people. And that's what I've been able to do in this life. Only this morning I was invited across to Dick Smith Electronics and to see the 200 people at the head office of a business that Pip and I started about 46 years ago with $610, and to know that that business still employs, I think they said 2,500 Australians and does over $1 billion a year turnover. And I said to them, look, we're very proud to have been involved in the start of this business, and just let's hope it lasts another 4 years so it can do 50 years. And they actually said, well, we reckon it's going to last 100 years. Australian Geographic, it was something that I started to change the image that I had, because I was down in Tasmania helping Bob Brown to try and stop that dam on the Gordon below Franklin, and the media made out that I was just a media tart, which of course I am, but they said I'm a media tart and I'm just down there to get publicity for my business interests, and they didn't understand that, in fact, my main love was the out of doors, and I loved going into the bush, and in fact I wanted to become a National Parks Ranger. Luckily for me, the year that I applied was the year that they said that you have to have a degree for some reason, and I was hopeless at school and there was no way I could get any qualification. But Australian Geographic, first of all, I'd like to commend everyone who's working on the magazine since Pip and I sold. The fact that it's still going and it's going really well, and this wonderful awards night goes, is fantastic. I think of some of the names right from the start. Howard Whalen, who was the first editor and wonderful writer. Will Pringle, who's here, did the most beautiful maps. Ike Bain, who's actually the good businessman behind the scene of Dick Smith and Ike Bain. And, of course, Tony Gordon, the wonderful artwork, and all the others that were involved. But the most important person, and I'm always told to put me down, they say, Dick, you wouldn't be anything without Pip. And that's absolutely right, Pip. The best thing I ever did was to con you into falling in love with me when you were a 17-year-old schoolgirl. And it's been a combination of the two of us, and I couldn't have done it without your fantastic support, so thank you. Thanks very much.
So beautiful. What can I say? I just heard Dick turn around to Greg and he goes, my best friend, shake his hand. Well done for mentioning Pip, and I hope you don't mind that Dick is also an equally beloved dad and grandfather many times over, and I think that says a lot, that he is equally adored. I often work with his stunningly beautiful and unbelievably talkative daughter, Hayley Bailey, who can talk twice as much as me. And when I first went to do a getaway story on Capella Lodge, I remember she was a bit ticked off because she said, "Oh, you just missed Dad. He flew in, he did all the electrics, and he flew back out again." I went, of course Dick Smith flew in and did all the electrics, of course. But a credit to you. Well done. Congratulations on behalf of everybody here. Ladies and gentlemen, if it's okay with you, we're just going to take a very short break. We'll collect those raffle tickets. I'll let you have a little chat, and we'll be back very soon with two extraordinary adventurers. I'll see you soon. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. I know that, thank you, so, you can stop now. Thank you. He would go all night. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that I'm in the right company when I say that I need to keep things on time. I know that you respect time. And I don't want us to get thrown out of this room before we have our last award. We have two extraordinary adventurers to speak with you now. I feel really bad asking Dick Smith and Terry Irwin to keep it down. No, just shh. It's okay. Bindi's got to go because she's got to drive back to the zoo tomorrow. Good luck, Bindi. Congratulations. Bye. Bye, Bob. Bye, Terry. I hope you didn't think for 1 second I'd let you do a quiet exit. Be safe, sweetheart. Bye. So worried about her. She trusts it. She says it's all going to be okay. She's going to get a good sleep. Okay. Dr. Glenn Singleman, Heather Swan, Australian Geographic, oh, there they are, Australian Geographic sponsored adventurers. We love them. Husband and wife team who jointly hold an assortment of world and Australian records in extreme sport, including one that is rather unusual, the highest wingsuit base jump. I didn't even know what a wingsuit was. Glenn is well known as an Australian and international documentary maker. He's a wonderful, inspiring speaker, a practicing medical doctor specialising in emergency expedition and intensive care medicine. As a filmmaker, he has made many successful National Geographic international films and is also a part of James Cameron's documentary team, of course, James Cameron, Titanic. Now, Heather, before meeting her partner in life and spirit, she was a senior corporate executive with absolutely no background in adventure at all. A fabulous marketing whiz, management positions all around the globe. She joined Glenn on one of his expeditions in 2000, and they have been adventuring ever since. Today, she is the only woman in the world to successfully combine high-altitude mountaineering and base jumping. One of only a handful of women in the world flying high-performance wingsuits. Heather is also a wonderful photographer, a freelance writer who has been published in all sorts of different magazines. Glenn and Heather have featured twice in Australian Story, twice on 60 Minutes, and a variation of international documentaries. They have, no surprise, won a Spirit of Adventure Award right here. And of course, their absolute passion in life is flying their wingsuits. And their next adventure is flying that wingsuit across the Grand Canyon. Many people ask them, why? Well, tonight is your opportunity to hear that answer. Would you please welcome Glenn and Heather to the stage now?
Hello. Thank you. Who conquers others is strong. Who conquers himself is mighty. If there is a two-sentence answer to the question, why adventure, then Lao Tzu nailed it 2,500 years ago with this simple quote. But what did he mean? What is the demon within that we have to conquer to be mighty? I believe it's fear. Because that footage that you just saw was Nick Vatiris and myself doing the first ever Himalayan base jump and setting a world record. Before we did that, everyone, even Greg Mortimer, said that's impossible, that's crazy, that's too risky. But Peter Diamandis, the founder of the X Prize, said to have true breakthroughs, we must take risk. The day before something is truly a breakthrough, it's just a crazy idea. So what was the breakthrough in base climbing the Great Trango Tower? Well, apart from being awarded an Australian Geographic Spirit of Adventure Award, I realised the value of fearlessness, a virtue that Mahatma Gandhi called the king of all virtues. I learned that only by overcoming our fears can we realise our deepest human potential. Because the fear of a challenge like base jumping is obvious, but the role of fear in our everyday lives is much, much more profound than we realise. Because through the limbic system, the primitive fear system, fear is hardwired into our brain. It's part of every decision that we make, 24/7. Fear is there, affecting what we think, how we talk to ourselves, what we have for dinner, what kind of work we follow, who we marry, what values and priorities we set in life. Fear is there. So the more that we understand fear, the easier it is to overcome. And for me, that's the value of adventure. Over a lifetime of adventure, I've confronted and overcome fear countless times. And this has helped build my resilience, my self-confidence, my self-efficacy, my courage. And I believe this is achievable for everyone. You don't have to jump off a cliff. I believe that any adventure or any interaction with the wilderness can make a difference. It can build the regulatory pathways in our brain to dampen down the primitive fear system. Now, this is all a bit much, a bit scientific. To put it in perspective, I just have to tell you a little bit more about myself. I am actually a doctor of emergency and remote area medicine, and I'm also an expedition filmmaker. I was part of the Australian Geographic Mount Minto Bicentennial Antarctic expedition with Greg and Margaret. I was part of the team that had the highest black tie dinner party in the world. I was the doctor and one of the cameramen on the first expedition to fly balloons over Mount Everest. And I've also joined the famous Hollywood filmmaker James Cameron on 3 expeditions. You've probably heard of him. He made some little films, Avatar, Titanic, Terminator. He is the most successful Hollywood director of all time. But he does these Hollywood films to pursue his real passion, and his real passion is exploration, especially underwater exploration. And I first went with Jim on an expedition to film in 3D the weird alien life that surrounds the hydrothermal vents, the volcanoes at the bottom of the ocean. And we made a documentary called Aliens of the Deep. And then I joined Jim again in 2005 to make yet another documentary about the most famous shipwreck in the world, the Titanic. And we were making yet another documentary about the Titanic because it's actually being eaten away, digested by iron-digesting bacteria. Those things that look like teardrops, they're colonies of bacteria eating the wreck currently at the rate of about 500 tonnes a year. And as the colony count increases exponentially, so the rate of dissolution of the ship increases, so that by 2027, all the decks and all the superstructure on Titanic will be gone, and by 2040, Titanic will be a mound of iron oxide on the bottom. So we took down underwater vehicles, Russian Mir submarines with robot-operated ROVs that went deep inside the wreck to film things that haven't been seen since it went down in 1912. And I learned a lot of things on this expedition. I mean, I learned a lot about filmmaking off Jim, but I learned something critical about risk management on this trip. When I went down to the Titanic myself, I was thinking, before I got on the submarine, I was thinking, the Titanic, it's like 12,500 feet down. That's like the pressure of a car stacked onto your wrist. What would happen if the thing broke, you know? You'd be screnched in half a second. And there must be warning. You know, when you watch those Hollywood movies and the submarines, they go, dive, 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 and they go deeper and deeper, and all the crew are standing around because the hull is going as they're going deeper and deeper, and is it going to cave in? That's what I thought would happen with these things. I was thinking, you know, do you hear creaking in these things? So I was really worried. So I went up to one of the designers, the Russian designers, and I said, look, when this thing goes to the bottom of the ocean, does it creak? And he looked at me in that deadpan sort of Russian way. He said, you hear creaking, you're about to die. So fortunately, I didn't hear any creaking that day, but I learned the difference between perceived risk and real risk. Perceived risk is Hollywood risk, you know, going down, what you see in the movies. Real risk is what we have to manage to achieve amazing things. And I started a dialogue with this engineer about real risk, about the life support system, about the electrical system, about how the thing's really going to get back to the surface. I learned a critical lesson about perceived and real risk. And it was something that stood me in good stead for the next expedition that I went on with Jim, which was the Deep Sea Challenger expedition, to build and pilot a submersible to the very, very bottom of the ocean, the Marianas Trench, 36,000 feet down, where the pressure is 16,000 pounds per square inch. That's like having a train carriage stacked onto your fingernail. That's how much pressure there is. To withstand that, we built, with the aid of a genius, an Australian genius called Ron Allen, we built a submersible that would protect Jim all the way to the bottom of the ocean and all the way back to the surface. I mean, anyone can go on a one-way trip to the bottom of the Marianas Trench. Getting back is the trick. So we built this submersible in that high-technology centre of excellence called Leichhardt. And it took us 7 years to build the thing, to test the thing, and it was on March the 26th of 2012 that Jim took the submersible by himself all the way to the very, very bottom of the ocean. Now, I've got to tell you, there were a lot of real risks involved in this project. And I was wondering, why would a guy who's king of the world, who is the most successful filmmaker ever, who's worth $1 billion, why would he put himself through so much risk? So I actually asked him, and this is what he said.
So you could say it's very risky, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the risks, but I think that that's healthy. I think it's healthy to really be preoccupied about this way, I could die that way, I could die that way. Because then you funnel, over the years that it's taken us to build this vehicle, you funnel that anxiety into the engineering solutions that make it safe. All right, if it's that risky, why the heck do you do it? Because I think every explorer has the same thing inside, which is they know that the risk is worth it because they're widening the pool of the light of knowledge. You know, we go down there and we're going to shine our headlights on something that people have never seen before. And it's important to do that. It's important for us as a species to not lose that drive to do that. Whether it's here, whether it's in the oceans, whether it's out in space, going to Mars, going to the outer planets, to the icy moons, whatever it is, we need to keep that part of us alive. Because the societies historically that always did the best, had the strongest economies, had the most powerful militaries as a result of that, were the seafaring nations. They're the ones that went out and looked to see what was there, not the ones that kind of hunkered down at home and thought everything was cool the way it was.
I believe that anybody can overcome fear by following a common sense process. I'm sure that people overcome fear using meditation and art and sacrifice, but for me, everything changed on my first trip down Clostrel Canyon in 1986. Adventure opened a new world of possibilities unencumbered by fear. And that level of control spread out into the rest of my life, so that now no dream is too outrageous or too impossible. And I believe that anybody can do this, but I can see many of you sitting there thinking, yeah, right, Glenn, that's okay for you to say because you're nuts, you're crazy. Well, now I'd like to introduce you to someone who's definitely not crazy, someone who is a business professional, a woman, a mother of adult children. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my wife, Heather.
Great. If you could just stay there.
Hello. Hello. Hi. He's totally amazing, isn't he? And it always feels rather strange to be trotted out as his proof of why adventure. But then I have to admit to you, when I first met Glenn, I would have been the first one to have asked him that question, why? Why would anyone, particularly a practicing medical doctor, hurl themselves off the world's highest cliff and do all the other amazing things that he does and so many people in this room do? And Glenn really believes in the power of overcoming primitive fear, evolving past that fear system to a place where so much more is possible. He believes in the power of this process to take us from where we are now to wherever we might want to be, no matter where we're starting from. And I guess my journey is a good example of the power of this process, because when we first met and then married, I had never done anything remotely adventurous. I'd never been skydiving, I'd never climbed anything other than the corporate ladder. And so my journey is somewhat proof of the power of why adventure. Now, when we set off to break Glenn's world record for high altitude base jumping, everyone said that it could not be done, or more specifically, that it couldn't be done by me. And I guess if you look at what I had to achieve, then they really had a point. It didn't look particularly doable. Do you think? Not particularly doable. And I guess I was thinking that from pretty much the word go, because I thought I was the world's worst skydiver. This was the very first step on a challenge that was going to transform me from corporate executive with no background in adventure to world record holding extreme sports person. And it began with becoming an expert skydiver. But there's a little bit of a problem with that if you're afraid of heights and you're terrified of single engine aircraft. Those two things combined, and I could not do what I was supposed to do. I couldn't think. I would become paralysed with fear. I'd spin out of control faster and faster and faster toward the ground, absolutely terrified. Skydiving just completely confounded me. I didn't like it. I couldn't do it. The more I tried, the worse I got. It was a complete disaster. And you know, at the time I thought that I was the world's worst skydiver, but as it turns out, I was pretty normal, because only 2% of people who do a tandem skydive go on to do even one more jump. And you probably didn't know that of all of the licensed skydivers in Australia, only 10% of them are women. And that's because women have a much more sensitive fear response than men. So in fact, what I was experiencing was normal. And it was only that I had this big goal driving me, this big commitment to climb and fly off the highest cliff in the world, that kept me going. Because for me, skydiving was terrifying for more than 50 jumps. And it was having that goal to drive me that kept me going. And it was also this commitment to our mental processes, a type of mental training that literally transformed me and enabled me to keep going, particularly the power of mindfulness, of meditation, of training the mind to be fully present in the moment, fully engaged in what you're doing. Because when you can do that, so much more is possible. And for me, this mental discipline, these mental processes transformed me from a bumbling skydiver to a wingsuit pilot capable of piloting the most powerful wingsuits in the world. These things are incredible. I've got one under here. Put it on. Now that would be really hard, especially with high heels. Can you see me in it? So this isn't it? This is my latest, greatest wingsuit. One journalist called it a cross between an Elvis suit and a flying Lilo, or a very fancy moo-moo. But they are so much more than that, as you can see. They are the result of modern genius, engineered specifically to fit the individual pilot. They transform a person. They transform a person, you know, like me, an earthbound person, into a ram air wing that can travel at speeds over 200 kilometres an hour. In fact, with a decent tailwind, Glenn and I have clocked nearly 400 kilometres an hour across the ground. Pretty impressive and very fun. And this was all about overcoming fear and taking one step at a time. And it was also about a process of transformation that involved physically transforming myself so that I would be capable of climbing and flying off the highest cliff in the world. So when we set out on this challenge, I was a corporate executive and I hadn't paid much attention to exercise or fitness. And I said to Glenn, how am I possibly going to fit in the time needed to make this transformation? He said to me, look, I don't want you to even think about it in terms of that. I want you to think about it in terms of the fact that I see far too many corporate executives in my emergency room who have never prioritised their health and their fitness. It should always come first, no matter who you are, no matter what you're doing, your health and fitness should always come first. And for me, it was just taking baby steps, starting out walking around the block, then jogging and then running and then climbing these incredible cliffs out in the Blue Mountains. Things that for me had been completely outside anything I would ever have believed possible for me. And it was just about having a goal, being committed to that goal, challenging the way that I was thinking about things, challenging the way that I was using my mind, actually changing the way that I was using my mind and reconfiguring my brain so that the higher part of the mind was constantly dampening down the primitive fear response. And when you can do that, so much more is possible. The other element of what we did, Glenn prescribed for me, was a pure plant-powered diet, 100% plants, which is the biggest contribution any individual can make to the environment and to your individual health. The healthiest, the most protective way of eating, the most protective against all the lifestyle diseases that are cutting our lives short. Now, it was that combination, physical fitness, mental toughness, and that level of energy that enabled me to think, well, I could climb and jump off the highest cliff in the world. And it didn't prove to be. We went on expeditions to Amar Dablam in Nepal, 2 expeditions to the Great Trango Tower in Pakistan. Each time we failed, until 4 years later, and we're now almost 5 years into this journey, we found Mount Meru in the Garhwal Himalaya of India. An absolutely stunning mountain that had only ever been climbed once before on a completely different route to the route we were climbing. And we had a team who were over half of whom were women, but more importantly, all of whom had a can-do, how can we make it happen attitude. And that is the key, and that is one of the wonderful things about adventure. The people that you find, the people that you share these incredible experiences with, they have that anything is possible, let's go out and do it attitude. And that's one of the things that I have loved the most. And our team were incredible. And it was a team who were finding a new route on this mountain because obviously we didn't rate our chances of success by climbing up the front of the mountain, which was 800 metres sheer. So we needed to find a new route up the western side, the back side. No one had ever been in this valley before, so it was an incredible privilege just to be there, just to set foot on this beautiful mountain that in Hindu mythology is the mountain at the centre of the universe. Absolutely stunning, and it sits in the middle of a cirque of beautiful mountains, including Mount Shiveling. But as we got higher, it was proving to be a very promising wingsuit base jump, because as we got higher, it got steeper and sheerer and the ice got harder. And we spent 23 days on this mountain, finding our way to the top, putting in the lines to carry up all of our gear, because we had filming gear, base jumping gear, gear for every possible scenario. And it was such a stunning part of the world. It is such a stunning part of the world. Such an incredible privilege to climb this mountain. And when we went to the summit, we looked around for the best place to jump, but there was a bulge near the summit, so we dropped back down and we found a perfect ledge just underneath, just at the top there where you can see our little bodies. But every time we would climb up to make the jump, the mountain was surrounded by clouds, so we would climb back to our snow caves at 6,000 metres, which was an 8-hour round trip, and we did this for days, up, down, until we were absolutely exhausted. And then we decided that we would sit on the ledge and wait and see if the cloud lifted and if we could jump. And the day that we sat and waited, it was -23. We sat on that ledge for 5 hours, and then we got a radio call from our ground crew who said, "Quick guys, there is a break coming in the cloud. If you can wiggle into the wingsuits, you're going to have..." And believe me, that is not easy on a little ledge. If you can wiggle into those wingsuits, you're going to have 10 minutes in which to jump.
Woohoo! So that jump probably seems a bit scary to most people. I guess your pulse rate is just that little bit higher. You're breathing a bit deeper. your blood pressure just elevated, your eyes more dilated, your blood sugar level higher, the circulation to your muscles is increasing and your blood is thickening.
And that's just from watching it.
And that's just from watching it.
That's what it's like, isn't it?
Yes, that's a fear reaction mediated by cortisol and adrenaline. And every animal on the planet experiences fear in fundamentally that same way. It's a fight, flight or freeze response, sorry, mediated by a primitive part of the brain called the limbic system, in particular a little nucleus called the amygdala. And the amygdala is this nucleus that scans all of our sensory information. Everything we see, hear, feel, smell, touch. It's scanning that 24/7, looking for danger, and it's ready to respond in 0.1 of a second with 3 strategies: fight, flight, or freeze. Every animal on the planet's got one of these, but only humans can inhibit it using a part of the brain up the front called the prefrontal cortex, the centre of our knowledge, our reason, our experience, our insight. We can use that to dampen down the primitive fear response. And to respond with fight, flight and freeze, that was a pretty useful strategy when we were hunter-gatherers on savannah. But in our era of high-speed communications and global interdependence, these instinctive fear responses can give rise to unconsciously prejudiced cognitive illusions. Illusions we don't really even understand that we have. Illusions that say fear-based things to us, like women who wear burqas are terrorists. Illusions that say Aboriginal people are lazy. Illusions that say refugees are queue jumpers. Illusions that say climate change is not really happening. Illusions that we are meant to butcher other creatures in order to eat them. Illusions that adventurers are reckless and put the lives of rescue personnel at risk. The media, advertisers, politicians and lobby groups are experts at manipulating our subconscious fear system, and the result is that we allocate resources in an illogical way. The examples of this are legion, but I just want to mention one gem. The Australian taxpayers are going to spend $500 million this year fighting terrorism in Iraq. As alarming as terrorism is, it should be noted that not one Australian has been killed by a terrorist on Australian soil. By contrast, obesity will shorten the lives of 9 million Australians by at least 12 years. 9 million Australians, half the people in this room, will probably be affected and have their lives cut short by a very, very real risk, obesity. And what's the Australian government's response? The Australian government's response to this real risk was to cut funding to the Australian National Preventative Health Agency. We now have the dubious record of spending zip on preventative health strategies against obesity. And that's because terrorism activates our fear system more than obesity. So emotion rather than logic is guiding our risk management policies. But thankfully, I have to say that Australian Geographic is a bastion of common sense in an inflammatory media landscape. The magazine continues to inspire, educate and inform with fearless reason and science. And for that, they deserve our support and our thanks. So, to conclude this, I'd just like to remind everyone that we are living in the happiest, healthiest and safest society that has ever existed in the whole history of the whole planet. So in the words of Franklin Roosevelt, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Thank you very much.
Well done. What an extraordinary speech. All night I've had a primitive fear of going up and down these two stairs in my high heels and ball gowns. It's nothing compared to these two. And something that they didn't mention is between them they have 4 children. No one would defy you, Glenn. No running away over a chocolate bar with him. No way. Definitely not. Amazing. Speaking of amazing, how incredible is that dessert? I have never in my life had a burnt honey ice cream Albert Einstein would approve, I have no doubt. Ladies and gentlemen, I legally have to let you know that the silent auction will close in 5 minutes, so please make sure that you get your final bids in for that. As we move into our final award for the evening, from Little Louie's Table, would you please welcome from Odyssey Travel, I would like to invite Dr. Brian Spencer to announce who is the winner of our Lifetime of Adventure winner. Over to you.
You know, I was going to bring my flying suit tonight, but I'm just going to walk down the stairs like everyone else tonight. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me say I'm delighted to be able to announce the last of the awards tonight, and that's the Australian Geographic Society's highest honour, the Lifetime of Adventure Award. And before Chrissy quizzes me about my membership of the Society, I'd just like to say to her and to you, Dick, I treasure that I have at home #1 edition of the Australian Geographic magazine amongst my precious souvenirs. Well, it's my privilege tonight to represent one of the Australian Geographic Society's sponsors, that's Odyssey Travel. And Odyssey is Australia and New Zealand's leading not-for-profit provider of world educational tours to suit the over 50s who have a passion for new experiences. In other words, they're people who are adventurers. Now, the Macquarie Dictionary lists a number of definitions for adventure, and they range from an exciting or very unusual experience, which I have to say is the experience enjoyed by our Odyssey travellers, and all the way to defining adventure as a bold, usually risky undertaking, a hazardous action of uncertain outcome. And we've seen plenty of examples of that tonight. And this is the kind of adventure that we are recognising and celebrating tonight. And our Lifetime of Adventure Award this year is going to a man who's led an extremely colourful life. Having travelled through and seen Europe by bicycle, he hitchhiked from his native Denmark to Australia in 1965. When he got here, he worked as a jackaroo, a mine worker, a road train driver and a buffalo shooter. In short, he quickly transformed himself into a true blue Aussie. But his first of many firsts that would follow over the next few years was a motorised open boat circumnavigation of the Australian continent in 1970, and a series of other motorised firsts followed that particular venture. He was the first to fly around the world in a small aircraft without the benefit of an autopilot. He was the first to drive west to east across the Australian continent in a Daihatsu. And he was the first to ride a motorbike around the world in just 28 days. And that's just to name a few firsts. And in late 1982 and early 83, he made the very first crossing of the Australian continent by a solar-powered vehicle with racing driver Larry Perkins. And I can remember how the Australian public were just captured by the progress reports of this wonderful adventure in this solar-powered machine across Australia. And out of that very epic journey grew the World Solar Challenge as we know it today. In 1990, the Australian Geographic Society recognised his contribution to a new low-impact brand of adventuring and handed him his first AG Society Award for Adventurer of the Year. This man has always stayed involved to some degree with the solar car event and with the development of sustainable transport in general. He describes himself as a futurist, and in 2007 was awarded the World Energy Agency Prize for his contribution to the development of hybrid cars. Now let's just have a quick look at some of his colourful career. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the 2014 Lifetime of Adventure Award, the winner, Mr. Hans Tholstrup.
Well, thank you, Australian Geographic, Dick, and of course Pip, who sewed the curtains in Dick's first shop. But I really thank the very thing that we have adventure. And I thought about it the other day, what's better, adventure or welfare? Well, adventure wins. And now in this world of the nanny state, I worry about the future. If the nanny state wins and we can't do adventure, I think we are lost. I indeed could not do the adventures I've done in today's world. Health and safety wouldn't allow it. And listening to Greg today and thinking of Dick's wonderful things, it's very sad if our children cannot have adventure. And about the fear, I once walked across the Simpson Desert because I feared the Simpson Desert. And I embarked going across, no radio, no nothing, and it was either you make it or you die. And I sat there one day in one of my many, many rests, and I picked up a bit of the Simpson, and in my hand I brushed away every grain of sand but one grain. And this grain of sand and I had a long philosophical discussion. Who was more important to the Simpson Desert, the grain of sand or I? The Simpson Desert couldn't care. So when you know you are but a grain of sand, fear is not such a big thing. So it's about finding yourself, and it's about adventure, which Greg Morton knows. So I thank you very much for keeping adventure alive, and It's not finished till they hammer in the nails in your coffin. Thank you.